Well, good afternoon and good morning or evening, depending on where you are in the world. It's my pleasure to welcome you to today's webinar, in which we're going to consider the exciting field of studying medicine in the UK. As education consultants, this is one of the most common topics we're asked about, and we hope that the session will provide you with some clear information about what's involved in applying to medical school. We'll be exploring the process from the point of view of a current medical student, Anjali Parmar, who's just completing her first year at UCL in London. We're also honoured to have on our panel Yasmin Sarwar, who's the Chief Education Officer at OIC, the highest performing A-level school in the UK, with a fantastic record of success in procuring medical school offers. And finally, on our panel, we have our Academic Director at Education Advisers, Mike Fanya. Mike runs our university consultancy services and will be here to shed light on what can often feel like quite an overwhelming application process. So this is what we're going to be covering in the session today. So we'll start off with Mike, who will provide an overview of what it means to study medicine here and look at details of the application process. We'll then be hearing from Anjali about her experience of choosing and applying to medical school and what it's actually like. Finally, we'll hand over to Yasmin to talk about what it is that medical schools are looking for and how to prepare the strongest possible application. You will see a Q&A button at the bottom of the screen. Please feel free to ask questions during the webinar. We have a consultant in the background who will answer some as we go, and others will be presented to our panelists at the end of the presentation. So thank you very much to all the panelists for joining us today. It's a great honour to have you here. And I'm going to now hand over to Mike, who is going to talk about why you might want to study medicine in the UK and go through the process with you. Over to you, please, Mike. Mike, we can't hear you. Can we just unmute you?
Hello, everybody. Can you hear me now?
So I think we're okay now. Yes.
Yeah. Hello, and hello to everybody. And as I say, welcome from stormy Surrey, where we've been having immense rain storms today. I just hope this is a much calmer next hour or so that we will have together. Why study medicine in the UK? Well, first of all, you've got a list of things there which tells you why it's advantageous to study in the UK. We've got 38 undergraduate medical schools, 5 quite new ones, all approved by the General Medical Council. And we have also got a number of world-ranked universities. And this means that you can get an education second to none if it comes to medicine in the UK. There are one or two other things I'll just mention why study in the UK. Quality control of medical training is done by government, and that is guaranteed. So medical teaching done in our universities is something which is reviewed and regulated by the British government. Innovative teaching methods. Many universities now have industry relationships that enable students to get practical experience with world-leading organizations, which is quite an advantage in their training. State-of-the-art technology, brilliant teachers, world-leading research. The UK is reckoned second in the world for science and research. And I think you probably know that in the recent pandemic, the UK has developed and distributed the vaccines for COVID on quite an impressive scale. There is also a long tradition of medical teaching. Going on to look at choosing the right courses, I've got here a publication by the Medical Schools Council, which is the representative and regulatory body for UK medical schools. This came out about a week ago. And the headline is, record number of applicants to medicine results in increased competition for places. And I'll just read you the opening paragraph. The large number of applications consists of increases in students applying for the first time and those reapplying from previous years. The total number of applications for medicine at UK universities in 2021 is up 20.9% compared to applications for entry in 2020. There will be greater competition than usual for places, as the number of places available now remains the same as in 2020, at around 9,500 places. I think that just gives you an idea of the competition there is to get in and why it is terribly important to prepare very carefully for entry to medical courses. Just a very quick word also to say to you, education advisors who are hosting this event are well known as a school placements company, but we also have a higher education team who specialize in placing students in mainly Russell Group universities and UK medical schools. Our consultants work on a one-to-one basis with students, helping them make course and university choices and preparing them for the admissions requirements that are needed for medical school applicants. This includes preparation for BMAT, UCAT tests, personal statement planning, and interview technique. And consultants work online with students and by email, and will also meet with them and their families face-to-face if, of course, restrictions allow that, which of course they haven't done for the past 2 years. The success rate of the team has been high, and as well as advising and helping with undergraduate courses, we also work with students for their postgraduate placements as well. During the application process, consultants are available normally 24/7, and they organize online sessions with university heads of departments when this is needed. There are no time limits on how much time a consultant will work with a student. It's not metered in any way. And for example, if it takes 10 drafts to get the right personal statement, well, so be it. So you've decided to apply for medical school. Where do you start? A very good place to start is really to speak perhaps to your teachers in the first instance. They know you well, and they also know if you're suitable for the courses that you are considering. They know what your standard of work is. Speak with your parents, speak with friends, do your research with university open days. Then comes the next problem. Which universities do I apply to? Well, now this is an entirely personal choice, obviously. Choose universities where you're going to enjoy studying. For some people, this might mean a university in a town where there is a very active nightlife, or one with a strong academic tradition, or one which offers great sporting facilities. In reality, each university offers its own special experience, and therefore it's best to attend as many open days as possible online, or hopefully this summer in person. University choice for medicine can be particularly tricky, however, because a different importance is given to the psychometric tests, UCAT and BMAT, by different universities. So it's worth finding out how they regard the importance of those particular psychometric tests. Now, you need to make an early start. About a year before you apply through UCAS, start going through brochures, go onto websites and do your research. It does take time, don't underestimate that. Doing your research, preparing for your applications is really quite a long-winded job, and therefore give yourselves plenty of time to make sure you've got the right courses and you have got the right universities. There are no right choices when it comes to universities, but there are plenty of wrong choices. So make a short list of the universities you're interested in and try to visit them. Well, BMAT and UCAT, those of you who probably know about them, will know that they are filter systems for actually finding out whether or not students applying or likely to apply have got the potential to do very well on a medical course. BMAT is the biomedical admissions test that's been developed by Cambridge University. The purpose of the test is to differentiate between applicants who appear equally well qualified and also applicants who've taken a range of different qualifications. In some cases, these might be international qualifications. So this gives an idea about the ability of those particular applicants. Since its introduction in 2001, a number of universities, home and abroad, use it. It is a 2-hour pen and paper test which has 3 sections. 2 sections are multiple choice, and the 3rd section is a writing task. The other psychometric test that is used is UCAT, UCAT. It is the University Clinical Aptitude Test that was launched in 2006. It's an aptitude and attitude test, not an academic test. The test is taken online at a test center. It lasts for 2 hours, and it's in a multiple choice format. It doesn't have any curriculum content, but it's designed to probe your skills, which include reading, writing, basic arithmetic, and social and personal attitudes. The UCAT test is particularly helpful because you get the result before you make an application to a university medical school. Education advisors, by the way, can provide tuition in preparation for both of these tests, and we work with specialists, and it has been quite successful over the last decade or so since we've been doing this. However, the most important part of the UCAS application is your personal statement. And in planning and writing it, you need to find the right balance between all the different sections, because a personal statement covers 47 lines, doesn't sound very many, has a maximum of 4,000 characters and spaces, and it's important to focus primarily on academic matters, and it needs to tell a story. If you are applying to study something you studied in school, like mathematics or history, your story needs to say why you enjoyed the subject so much. If it's a new subject like medicine or engineering, you should explain the core academic subjects you enjoy and how this has led you to choose your subject area at university. You should mention how you have investigated the subject, any extra work or projects that you've undertaken, and any extracurricular activities you do to support those skills. As a rough guide, your personal statement should have an introduction of about 6 lines. The main part of about 22 to 25 lines should be academic matters. Something on extracurricular should take up no more than 8 to 10 lines. And finally, your conclusion should be about 4 lines. It's very likely that your personal statement will be remembered by the way you started and therefore by its opening sentence. So you need to make your opening introduction stand out for all the right reasons. Try to avoid overused words like I am passionate, or don't forget to show why you want to study medicine. Avoid cliches such as, I've always wanted to study medicine ever since I was born, which is obviously not true. And it's not very helpful either to an admissions tutor. And there are some things to avoid when you're writing your personal statement. Don't state the obvious. Don't use slang. Don't try and make jokes. This can be really, really bad news. Don't be controversial. It might be tempting to say something which is hugely controversial on the assumption that someone will think how clever you are. Don't use inappropriate examples. Don't list things. Don't include books that you haven't read. And don't lie. Don't copy another personal statement. Very important. UCAS has got sophisticated software. There's a thing called copycatch, which if a match is detected, your application will be blacklisted for all of your university choices. And that means no one's going to look at you in a hurry. So the conclusion that there is a good opportunity here when you get to the conclusion to bring together all the themes you've introduced in your personal statement to form a final overall character image to leave the admissions tutor with that. Very, very important. So as important as starting to be remembered, and so it is, the conclusion should do the same sort of job. I think don't be arrogant when you do your conclusion or oversell yourself. For example, I think I should be accepted because I'm very enthusiastic and will work hard. Better would be, I am sure I will be a successful doctor and take full advantage of all opportunities should this application be successful. So, your personal statement. I've also looked at the main steps. How am I doing on time, Mary?
Well, we probably need to move on in a second, Mike. Fantastic,
Right, okay.
really useful tips for the personal statement, etc.
Well, I'll wrap this up by just saying, if you are planning your medical school application, there are 7 steps to consider. 1, meet academic requirements. 2, sit admission tests, UCAT or BMAT or both. 3, gain and reflect upon work experiences. 4, write a personal statement. 5, apply through UCAS. 6, maybe attend an interview, certainly attend an interview for medical school. And 7, lastly, most important, achieve the requirements of your conditional offer. I'll leave it there for the moment.
Thank you very much indeed, Mike. We'll probably have lots of questions for you towards the end to follow up.
Okay.
So Mike's obviously covered where you started. Probably all sounds quite overwhelming, and I think it's the perfect time to bring in our student Anjali, who, as I said, has just completed her first year at UCL in London. I think we've covered really the process of choosing a university in an objective way. Let's just talk to Anjali now about how she experienced the whole process. So Anjali, can I start by asking you why you decided to study medicine?
Yeah, so for me, it was just because I'd always been quite strong in science at school. I'd always enjoyed biology and chemistry. So that helped to narrow it down when it came to choosing A-levels. And then when it came to picking an actual career within science, I thought about, well, where else am I quite strong? Like, what else do I enjoy? And I thought, well, actually, I really like interacting with people. I love meeting new people. And generally, I am quite a social person. So I thought if I could just combine those people skills with science, then I think medicine would have been quite a good fit for me. And yeah, so from there, really, I just thought the combination of being able to apply scientific knowledge with speaking to people would mean that medicine would be a really good vocation to follow. Another thing that I did think about as well is that I love how with medicine, it's always changing. There's always things to be learnt. And I think that's just something that you don't necessarily always get with other jobs. And so I think to be in an industry where you're always moving forward, you're always having to keep reading, you're always having to keep learning, that's actually a really nice aspect of the job as well. So that was something else I thought about.
Fantastic. And can you just tell us, Anjali, what were your A-level subjects? Because we sort of touched on having to have the right subjects, the right qualifications. What did you take for A-level?
Yeah, so in my school, we had to start off doing 4 subjects. So I picked maths, biology, chemistry, and Spanish. Then in year 13, I actually dropped maths because I really enjoyed Spanish. It was such a nice change for me from science like biology and chemistry. And I did a little bit of research into the universities that I was interested in. And essentially, they just wanted you to have biology and chemistry. And then the third subject could be any other subject, as long as you were able to get an A in it. So I took that into account, dropped maths and kept Spanish. And yeah, I was still able to get interviews from all 4 universities. So yeah, I would just say as long as you've got biology and chemistry, that would be what most universities are looking for, but it does depend. I'd say Oxbridge and slightly more competitive unis, they might be looking for maths as well, but I think it does depend on the university and it's definitely worth researching.
Yeah, really, really good point. I couldn't agree more with that. The universities do have different entry requirements. Chemistry is always an absolute necessity, and usually biology or another science with it. So that's great. So you're glad you did the Spanish, Anjali?
Yeah, I love Spanish. Like I said, it was a nice change. And yeah, it was just, even now at UCL, I'm able to keep going with Spanish. So, it did count for something. And I think it was also quite nice in interviews because I was able to speak about it quite a lot. Because I think something that they like is if you're able to have something that's not just medicine related in your life. So yeah, it was a good talking point in interviews as well.
Brilliant. And we've got on the screen here the universities that you had interviews at. Can you tell us why you chose those 4?
Yeah, so for me, the main factors was location. I knew I didn't really want to go further than Nottingham. And also I was quite keen on London. So I thought if I go for 2 London unis, 2 outside, then that's quite good variety in that sense. I also had a look at the course structure. So you might already know about the different structures. So there's 3, there's traditional, integrated, and problem-based learning. So integrated was the one that I was quite drawn to, and that's essentially where, rather than learning by each discipline, so by biochemistry, physiology, anatomy, you learn based on the body systems. So for example, I would learn about the digestive system, and then within that, you would go into each discipline to do with that specific area of the body. So I think it's quite nice because it is a good way of getting your clinical knowledge as well as the academic. So I thought about that. I thought about course structure. And the other thing I really liked about all 4 universities is that they do place a heavy emphasis on clinical placement quite early on. So you do get to go and see patients, you get to go into hospitals, clinical settings quite early on, literally from day 1 of university. So that was something else I took into account, yeah.
Okay, fantastic. Can you briefly talk us through the application process? So what stages did you go through? Were there any particular challenges? Was it an enjoyable experience? Lots of questions in one for you.
Yeah, so it is a long process. It can be stressful, but it is enjoyable because you do get to see your hard work come to fruition. So it is really rewarding in that sense. So, sorry, what was the question? Was it just about how
the process really? So taking the UCAT and the GMAT tests, working through the work experience, etc.
Yeah, sure. So yeah, I think essentially for me, I set out a timeline over, what do I need to do? What are the stages? So first, when it came to deciding is medicine actually right for me, I thought, okay, so let me do work experience because that's something that is going to be required of me anyway. And it's a good talking point in interviews, personal statement. So I did my work experience. I did 1 week in A&E. I did a week at my local GP and also a week in a cardiology ward. So having a range of work experience is definitely really useful. And I also did a year of volunteering at a care home. Something to add though is that having done my work experience, I think that really helped me to solidify my decision to do medicine because I got to speak to doctors. I got to actually witness the work that they're doing within hospitals, within the GP. So having done that, I knew that, you know, having volunteering is something that would be really good as well. So that's when I decided to go to my local care home, and I did some work experience there. I also did a year of working as a retail assistant. So something I would say is that it's not necessarily essential for you to have just medical related work experience. It can just be, you know, a job, like a part-time job. So that's something else I did. And then having done work experience and volunteering, I looked into the different exams. So I did decide to do BMAT because I really liked UCL. And so I thought if I do the UCAT early on, then that will give me lots of time to prepare for my interviews, BMAT, and also personal statement. So I did my UCAT at the end of June, essentially straight after my year 12 end of year exams. I started doing work towards the UCAT. Then when I completed the UCAT, I started BMAT preparation in the summer. And I actually did that with the intention to take the BMAT in August, because I think for my year we had two sittings, sorry. And then I actually changed my mind and decided to do the BMAT in October to give me more time to prepare. So something I would say is think about what kind of learner you are, because for me, I know that the more time I have to prepare, the more confident I feel going into an exam. So that's why I decided to take the BMAT later on. And then, yeah, after BMAT, I worked on interview prep and went from there.
Fantastic. So you sounds as if you quite enjoyed the challenge of the process, but that being organised and thinking ahead was obviously quite important for you as well.
Yeah, definitely.
Yeah. Okay. Thank you very much. And just finally, are you enjoying it? And what advice would you give to anyone who's thinking of applying?
Yeah, so I am really enjoying it. Obviously, this year has not been conventional in the sense it would usually be, but yeah, I've really enjoyed it. I haven't felt any regrets on going into medicine. Year one's been really nice. Like, they've all been really supportive at UCL, and it's just been really nice actually to just finally do something that you're really passionate about. So yeah, it's just been really rewarding actually, and yeah, I'm really looking forward to year two. I would say in terms of advice, definitely get your work experience in early. Use that as a way to decide if medicine is something that you would like to go forward with. Time management is really key. So I think it's good if you can get your personal statement before going into year 13, just so that you can show it to your teacher straight away, and then it will be ready for October 15th. I would also say don't be too disheartened if you don't get the score you want in your exams. So for example, for me in my UCAT, I got 700, but a band 3. And generally, most people will get a band 1 or a 2, but it didn't actually limit my prospects of getting an interview. I still got an interview at all 4 places. So yeah, I would just say, you know, take on the challenge and just go for it really. If you know that you want to do medicine, then it'll be a really good journey. It'll be really rewarding.
Fantastic. Thank you so much, Anjali. Well, I'm
Thank
sure
you.
I have some questions for you, but yeah, all the very best for the rest of your medical studies.
Thank you.
Okay, thank you very much. So I have what it takes. This is the time I would like to bring in Yasmin Sarwar. So it's a real pleasure to introduce Yasmin today. She has an extraordinary career in education. So Yasmin is a college founder and principal, and now the Chief Education Officer of the highest performing college in the UK. 92% A star and A grades at A level in 2019, which, as we know, is the last year of formal exams. Absolutely stunning results, and over 60 medical school offers for her students in 2020. Oxford International College caters mainly, but certainly not exclusively, for ambitious international students, offers A levels and a 1-year GCSE course. But since we've known Yasmin, which is quite some years now, I mean, she's been totally inspirational. She inspires her students to aim high and provides them with the skills and the opportunities that they need to succeed. Yasmin is recognised in the UK and globally as a leading educationalist, and has won awards both as a teacher and as a businesswoman. She's passionate about enabling young people to reach their potential, and she really works tirelessly to promote the highest standards of teaching and learning. It's a real pleasure and an honour to have you with us here today, Yasmin. And I'd like to just ask you, What is it that medical schools are looking for?
Thank you. Thank you very much, Mary. Thank you for inviting me on this call today. So I think there's so much that Mike and Anjali has already covered in terms of what medical schools are, looking for. I think the perspective that I would like to add is also the challenges that's going to face in terms of applying to university now that we're still in the pandemic, but there are some challenges that's arisen from, especially with when you apply to certain universities. So I think that's I would like to add that. But in terms of what medical schools are looking for, I mean, there are three things, there are three stages to just embrace. That's basically ensuring that you discover your passion, is what Anjali was talking about, doing work experiences and all that. It's very important that you can affirm your passion, because, at the interview stage and across your whole application, you want to be able to present a combination of both your head and the heart. Your head with all the strategies, but your heart being very, this has got to be a genuine vocation that you want to do, and therefore that obviously requires certain personal qualities. And it's really good that you start early, so don't wait until you're year 12. So if anyone listening on this call today who are in year 10, in year 11, you have an interest in wanting to go into life sciences or healthcare, then really start building that discovery that this is what you really want to do. And then it's okay if you change your mind, because even if you look to change to other courses, the strategy is pretty much the same, especially if you're aiming for top universities. So things like admission test and interview still applies. So, do start early and figure out whether this is something that you want to do. And then, of course, the next bit is building blocks for your evidence. And that building blocks is what I would call it as super curricular activities. So anything that can present as an evidence. So whether it's to do with wider reading, so making sure that you're reading books related to medicine or related to science in general. So that will demonstrate that you have an interest in that field. Secondly, I would say is doing things like work experience, voluntary work, and then obviously taking into account as well things like competitions and projects. And then you've got things like extracurricular activities as well to present your personal qualities. So there's the super curricular activities, and then there's the extracurricular activities. And those are the things that will basically be your building blocks for your evidences, which you will be able to present either through your personal statement and your interview. So personal statement and interview is really just the completion of that process, but you've got to start building the blocks. And I would advise you to also, every time you do something, whether you read a book or whether you take part in an activity, write a blog or write a diary of everything that you do. And the key thing is reflection, because it's very easy to describe your CV and say you have done X, Y, Z, but when it comes to reflecting upon the things that you've done, students often find that difficult. I sit on interview panels for medicine, and one of the things that students normally find it difficult is to reflect upon the experiences and then provide that dots to connect everything that you've done, whether you've read a book, whether you've taken part in an activity, in a project, in a competition, is how you connect the dots together is very important. And of course, now the challenge of getting into top universities, because there's a 13% increase in applications for medicine last year, and they're not increasing the number of seats, even though there are 5 new medical schools, and of course the cap on international students remain at 7.5%. So for those of you from overseas who are applying for medicine, there's a 13% rise overall in terms of application, and then there's also this cap for international students. So the challenge is there, in particular if you're aiming for G5 universities as well, so Oxford, Cambridge, Imperial, UCL, LSE, and other. LSE obviously doesn't offer medicine, but if you're applying to any of the other 4 G5 universities, application is very competitive. So you've got to make sure that you have an outstanding personal statement, you do well in your interview, you do fantastic in your UCAT and BMAT, And you've got to make sure that, of course, academics is important, because that's the first thing that the universities will look at. That will get your foot in the door. But then once you get your foot in the door, you have to look beyond that. And UCAT and BMAT is increasingly becoming the main filter. So, you know, a lot of the universities look at top 20% of the UCAT and BMAT scores, and then they invite you an interview on that basis. So a lot of, you know, very few universities will invite you in for interview and then look at it after the interview process. It's normally at UCAT and BMAT stage, they filter students and then they invite for interviews. And in interviews, you know, it's really important that you prepare for the different style of interviews, whether you're doing the mini multiple interviews or you're doing the panel interviews. Most interviews are now online, so a lot of it has been converted to panel interviews. You still have to be prepared for both types of interviews. And again, it's very important that you build the blocks. So, you know, don't just prepare for interview, because that should be really at the last stage for year 13. What you should be doing from year 10 onwards is really building that knowledge-based knowledge and skills. So, for example, every activity or every book that you read or activities that you've done, all will add up as your evidence, will all help you for the interview. Now, in terms of for international students in particular, I would say that your UCAT and BMAT is going to be the main filter. So make sure that you start preparing, because the requirements for international students as opposed to home students is slightly different. So they do require higher scores in your UCAT and BMAT, in particular because some students don't come in with GCSE qualification, they have other pre-A-level qualifications, so therefore the UCAT and BMAT becomes key in terms of filtering. So, I mean, that's what medical schools are looking for. You really got to make sure that you can display your passion, provide the evidence for your passion, and then of course make sure that you have the right strategy, as what Mike and Anjali was talking about. You know, you've got to make sure that you choose the right universities. I think in particular for international students, that's even more important than home students. So make sure you choose the right universities and make sure that you have the right strategy from your score point of view. So for example, your UCAT, if you score below a certain threshold of UCAT scores, you may not be successful for certain universities. So the good thing about UCAT is that you get your results on the same day. So you can make your selection of your universities based on your UCAT scores. BMAT, of course, is a risk because BMAT is taken after you have applied to university. But at least with UCAT, you can almost eliminate or select universities that you would be able to attend. So that could be a very good strategy from that point. But I would say for medical schools, you just got to make sure that you really build up the evidence block for your passion, because that is key.
Thank you so much. I mean, fantastic advice there. The idea of having that continual process, building those blocks, preparing for interview, and also the reflection, I think, is something that is so easy not to consider when you're just busy building up experiences and things. So really brilliant advice. That brings us on to another topic, actually choosing the right place if you are able to take your A-levels and to prepare at this critical time where you're going to get the support of teachers who can inspire and guide you. So some of you who are taking part today will be at this stage. You'll be looking forward to your sixth form and considering your options. So just like to look for a minute about what factors should you consider when you're looking at your sixth form education. So you need to choose a school or college that has a track record of supporting students with medical school applications, because it is clearly it's an involved process that requires a lot of dedication and support from your teachers. You'll be looking for somewhere that will ensure that you can get the results that you're capable of, particularly in those key subjects, and you need somewhere ideally which is going to help you with the work experience and to put everything into context, which I think has come through really clearly from what you're saying, Evan. You have to sort of build in this bigger picture. So can you tell us a little bit about Oxford International College and how you support your students?
Yeah, so I started my career, so I teach chemistry and biology. So as you can imagine, everybody in my class would be applying for a healthcare or life science degree. Over the course of the last 10 years, my team and I, I've sent around 400 to 450 students to medical school in 2020, where when the schools were, the lockdown and schools were closed, and of course the universities were concerned about the grade inflation. We've had an epic year of university destination, and then this year where application is even more competitive because universities are making less offers than they used to do pre-pandemic. So pre-pandemic, per place they would make ×2 to ×4 offers per place, but this year they've made ×1.5 to ×2 offers per place. And then when you compare that with the 13% rise in application, that means this year has been really conservative, and this is a domino effect that's going to last for at least 3 years before the numbers get back to how it was previously. And the reason why there's a domino effect is because obviously the government U-turn last year with the A-level results, and that basically caused disruption in terms of student numbers, and of course the concerns by universities around grade inflation. And because of that, there's they've been very conservative with their offers, but we've had a fantastic year again. We've had 100% offers in for medical school, so all our students who have applied for medicine have had offers, including offers from G5 universities as well. And again, the reason why I'm making the emphasis on G5 is because that's even a much higher barrier to achieve. And of course, we have students applying as home students, and we have students applying as international students, and the barrier for international students is even greater. So we've been very successful, and the key to our success has been really making sure that we have those 3 things cut out, making sure that students discover their passion, building block for their passion, and then making sure that they have the right strategy. So discovering the passion is by doing things like wider reading, work experience, voluntary work, taking part in competitions and projects and so on. So our students are placed into 3 different career groups. They're placed into life sciences, physical sciences, as well as commerce and humanities. So students who are in the life sciences group, and in fact all students, will have coaching, mentoring done by mentors. So for example, our medics will be taught by doctors or medical students at either Oxford, Cambridge, Imperial, UCL, and they coach them on things like admission tests and interview, but also preparing them for things like work experience, voluntary work. So one of the questions that came on the chat just now was, how do you prepare for work experience, especially now? So we've been very fortunate that we've been able to do a lot of online work experience, connecting with doctors. So we've connected with University of Birmingham. We've done programs with UCL. I know some of our students are going to Manchester this summer for work experience with a GP firm. So we've done a lot of online work experience, work simulation programs. Of course, it's different from doing in person, but the universities are aware, of course, of those challenges. But what is key is how you innovate those experiences and make sure that you still get some form of relevance to your course. So that's what we've been doing in terms of work experience. And of course, now that hopefully we can all go out in person now, so which means that students can have in-person work experiences. So that's key. So every half term our students do work experience, and then of course having the wider reading and reflection. I cannot tell you how important reflection is, because you can describe all your success, and you can even explain what you've done, and you can even analyze everything that you've done. But when it comes to reflection, that is what's going to make a good student to become a wow student when you're sitting on that interview seat. And that's key, and that's why having constant feedback over their work that they do by their mentors is extremely important. So we have an academic team as well as a coaching team, the mentors, and the mentoring has been really successful, where they've been able to help them with the key components of personal statement, admission test, interview, and also making sure that they choose the right university, and then you present your application in the best way possible, because it's also about the right strategy. So you can have fantastic building blocks, but if you don't have the right strategy, then you don't get those offers as well. I give you a very short example. I met a student from Thailand once who when I met her GCSE results were she had 5 subjects. She's an international student. She did 5 subjects, so she'd had a couple of A stars, A, B, and C. And I said to the parents, this is a very, very complicated case, because the GCSE, you've got to get top GCSE results. The rule of thumb is 6 A stars or 6 8s or 9s to be able to apply to medical school. And I mentioned to the parent, this is a very complicated case, but she was very determined. She came to OIC 2 years. She had 2 A stars, 1 A. She applied after her A level, so she took a gap year. So instead of applying in year 13, she took a gap year and applied after she's done her A levels. And to cut a long story short, she got into UCL, and UCL is a G5 university. So with, despite having those GCSE results, she got into G5 university. So it's really important to have the right strategy. So you could get straight A stars, done everything, and still not get there. So strategy is very important. But of course, you've got to start off with the building blocks. So in terms of OIC, we've had 100% success with medical school application. All our students this year have been placed, including G5 universities, and our students also apply worldwide. We have a global strategic pathway program where students, have the opportunity to apply for not just UK universities, but they can apply to Australia, US, Canada. We've had students going back to Asia as well for medical school application. So, but we've had 100% success this year, and hopefully that will continue. So that gives you, I think from our perspective, we feel that we have the right pedagogical sort of approach in terms of not just in terms of the academic training, but also in terms of the career planning as well.
Fantastic. Thank you so much, Yasmin. It's very inspiring. I think this sort of brings us really to our questions. We've got a few questions that I'd like to address. So if you'd like to unmute yourselves and come back, all our panelists, I will go through some of the questions we've had. Some of them I think we have covered, so we can just answer briefly. So we've got one question here about quotas for foreign students. I think, if I'm correct, Yasmin, you said that 7.5%.
7.5%, yeah.
Is that a national quota?
That is a national quota. Yeah. That is an NHS quota. They are looking to seeing if they can increase the quota, but at the moment they haven't gone quite far with that. But there has been a lot of talks in terms of increasing the quota, but it hasn't been formalized yet. But there's a 7.5% overall. So basically 7.5% of your number, whichever university. So let's say you had a 200 allocation in your university, it'll be 7.5% of that allocation.
So it applies to each university.
Each university, yeah.
Yeah, thank you. A question here about if you opt for biology, chemistry and physics, and you still apply for Oxford and Cambridge. I think, yes, clearly you can. There's a perfectly acceptable subject for your A-levels. So I've got one question here. What's your take as advisors on independent school intake into Russell Group and Oxford University decreasing drastically, even though students have met their grades over the last 2 years? I don't know who'd like to, Yasmin, you're smiling, perhaps you'd like to address
yeah
that.
No, I'm smiling because so independent school intake to Russell Group and Oxford University has decreased, when you look at the numbers this year, but I think what you need to remember that it's not just the academic that is going to get you into these top universities, especially like Oxbridge. It's really important, like our numbers have increased in terms of our Oxbridge and also in terms of our, overall getting into medical school. But that's because, again, you have to do well in every other category as well. So for example, as Mike mentioned earlier on, you got your personal statement, you got your admission test, you've got your interview. So even if you've got 5 A stars at A levels and you're like the top student in the school, but if you don't get those scores in your BMAT and UCAT and your interview, then you're not going to get through. That's why strategy really matters. That's why this girl that I just described to you from Thailand, who had, not your typical profile of a top student, yet got into UCL medical school. So it's really down to good strategy as well. I don't know, Mike, if you want to add anything to that, but that's how I feel for independent schools.
No, I fully agree with you. Thank you. I think you've covered it very well there, Yasmin. And funnily enough, we've had an increase from Hertwood House over the last year or two into Oxford and Cambridge, strangely enough, as an independent school. But I do think overall, looking at the figures, they are down, published by the Independent Schools Council, they are down quite a lot, by 25% or more, since about 2018. And I don't think that's going to change. I suspect, if anything, it'll go down even further in the longer term. Yeah, which is not a bad thing.
Okay, thank you very much. We've got a question here. So apart from Oxford International College, which is clearly extraordinarily successful with medical school applications, which other secondary schools have programs which support students? Obviously, you can't really go into details, but perhaps, Mike, you'd like to address the issue of actually choosing the right school.
Yeah, I think that's a good question, because a lot of schools and sixth form colleges now offer specific specialist medical school streaming, in a sense, and courses. And there are quite a number of these now. I was interested, I was looking at sixth form colleges, particularly in London. Most of them, 80% of them, were offering a medical school entry course, which I think, whether it was successful or not, I don't know, because I haven't seen the results of it. But I think with the independent schools as well, they're getting G'd up a bit more in terms of looking at the medical school entry situation, because there is no doubt that that's where the pressure is. More and more people, as we've already know, are wanting to apply for medical school. And we know also that the amount of medical school places is actually down. But I think that there are quite a number of schools which offer very good advice and courses in getting into medical school. And again, it's well worth looking at. I'm not naming names, because I'm not quite sure how far down the list one ought to go on that one. But all I'm saying is that, yes, there are quite a number that do offer that specialist track through to medical school.
Thank you.
Mary, can I just ask, there are some questions on here which is easy answers.
Yes, please feel free to pick them up. Yes.
Okay, because like the first one, is there a physical fitness required for admission? There's no physical fitness, but there's fitness to practice. So so that is something that will be tested at when you apply for medical school. The next question, what UCAT and BMAT scores are needed to place you in a bracket to be invited to interview? That is different for home or local international students. So if, for example, if you're an international student and you're looking at Cambridge, then if you get anything below a 6, it's unlikely you'll be given an offer.
You could forget it.
So it's really different. So Imperial, for example, the BMAT scores are pretty high for international versus local. UCAT is normally, there's a cutoff or the top 20%. So there's 2 requirements. There's one is the minimum requirement and the other one is the threshold requirement. Minimum requirement is what you see on the prospectus, like an A in maths or an A in GCSE maths, an A in GCSE English. But don't be happy with minimum requirement. It's the threshold requirement that you've got to meet. And unfortunately, you don't know what the threshold requirements are because that depends depends on the cohort that applies. But they are, obviously, we have certain insights into what those requirements could be. And that's normally based on, like, you know, you could take like last year's requirements, or you can take an average, and there's some insights there. So if you have questions on that, we can happy to share with you in terms of the UCAT and the BMAT requirements. The US question, AP subjects. So yes, US have taken away SATs, and also top high schools are doing away with AP subject test as well. That is very correct. That's what's happening in the US at the moment. However, if you're looking for Ivy League universities, the top band 1, I would suggest still to do SATs. So our students who are applying to the US are still taking SATs, because that will add to your application. And also, if you can convert your results to a GPA transcript, if you're studying in the UK, and if you can provide some form of conversion, that will be really helpful for band 1 universities. The next question about Singapore, how will colleges prepare them? That's quite straightforward. You can apply in year 13, and then you take a year after that. So let's say you were successful in your year 13, you can ask for 2-year deferment if you're doing national service. If you don't succeed in your year 13 application, you then apply in your first year of national service, and then you can get a 1-year deferment. I've had students who've done that, and you know, a lot of our boys from Singapore are in the same, and universities tend to give 2 years deferment for national service. Thank you. I just thought I'll just the easy ones.
Yeah, no, that's brilliant. Thank you very much. There's a few questions here about students taking the IB. Mike, perhaps you could come back on that in terms of...
From the IB point of view, it's an interesting one, because I was talking to Wimbledon KCS, which is one of the first of the schools in the UK to go into IB many years ago, and they have now been dropping it completely, because they did find problems with going on to science-based courses where students had not done the sort of A-level specialist type course. Basically, you need 38 plus points to be a viable applicant for a medical course. And you do need to have, at the higher level, again, the sciences, so that you still need the same sort of background there. You should still be able to get in on those. If you do have those types of qualifications, it shouldn't therefore be a barrier to you getting in by any means. But I think some schools have taken fright a little bit with the IB. What have you found, Yasmin? Have you found a problem there?
I think IB is fine. My general perception about IB is that they require, so IB is a great curriculum, but in terms of the requirements at university, I feel that the requirements for IB is higher than A-level. So when you convert the number of A stars and the IB scores, I'm not sure why this is the case, but IB scores tend to be, so for example, you could be applying to Imperial, and the IB scores requirement for an international, obviously again, is different for home student. Home student is slightly lower requirement than international student because of the cap, really. That's the reason why. But for international students, I would say you need to get like 41 out of 45, or 30, 39 or 40 out of 45, which in my opinion, it's lower than 3 A stars. So I would say it's not really comparability. So from a strategy point of view, I would say if you're doing medicine, again, I would say A-level would be, because the thing is with IB students still need to do UCAT, still need to do BMAT, still need to do admissions test, still need to do all the other components that would be required as a pre-qualifying criteria. So with IB, you know, you have to also be able to manage your time as well to be able to do all those components. Plus, strategically, the requirements are slightly higher. But IB students are they're very well-rounded, very good students. So I think, you know, you could still apply with, you know, IB is still a good, in terms of entry.
I think provided you've got the points, you know, fine, it's worth the application, and you've got the basic requirements, and there shouldn't be a problem. But I think that there have been a number of schools who've taken fright on that one, and
Thank you very much indeed. We are coming to the end of our hour together, so apologies if we haven't answered your questions. we will follow up with you afterwards, any that have remained unanswered. So just finally, we are here to help. You can contact us and put the details on the screen here. Any further information that you would like, or if you'd like to find out more about our services, we'd always be delighted to have a chat with you. So it just really remains today to thank our panelists very much. It was very, very interesting, and I hope everyone's found it a useful webinar. It has been recorded, and the recording will be available on our YouTube channel shortly, so we'll make sure that you're sent details of that. So thank you very, very much indeed. All the very best, and have a great summer. And Anjali, particularly wish you great success next year with your studies. And thank you for sharing your experiences with us. Thank you very much, everyone.
Thank you. Bye.
Bye.